Hi, listeners. Welcome to the Natural Birth Talk. This is Rachel, and I wanted to give you guys a trigger warning. This episode is about a stillbirth with a subsequent home delivery. This is Jillian's story, part 2. So if you haven't checked out part 1 from 2 weeks ago, go ahead and check that out. I hope you find this episode enlightening. Hi, I'm Rachel, owner of the Natural Birth site, certified birth doula, childbirth educator, and midwife's assistant.
And I'm Tiffany Muniz, certified birth doula, lactation counselor, and midwife assistant.
Here, you'll learn all about different aspects of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
Remember, none of this information should take the place of your care provider and is not medical advice.
Birth is not a medical emergency.
Thanks for listening.
So most of Wednesday is a blur.
Yeah.
There was a lot of Will going in and out, calling people. There was a lot of telling them the updates, and he called his parents and they said that they were going to come because they live in southern Missouri, so they weren't super far. My brother came over after work. My pastor came. It was kind of funny. Maybe funny is not the right word, but I remember thinking way afterwards when I was reflecting on all the things that I'm like, this is very obviously the situation is abnormal, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you don't usually entertain your in-laws and your pastor when you're in the middle of labor,
Yeah.
It was kind of almost funny to me afterwards as I thought about it, because there was one point my pastor, Pastor Bob, came in and he was kneeling by the side of the bed and he was just crying with us, and it was this beautiful moment. And I was laying on my side with Will kind of laying behind me, and we were talking, and I remember being talking to the pastor and then being wait, hold on. And then I rolled over onto my hands and knees and just was ugh, and had a couple contractions and then laid back down and then was I'm sorry, you were saying? It was just ridiculous. Which he understood because he had just recently, him and his wife had just had their first baby.
Okay.
Which I just absolutely was so appreciative and grateful to him, because he was still on paternity leave when he came to our house and
Wow.
all the stuff. He was not on the clock. He did not have to be there, but he chose to be there anyway, which was so wonderful. So yeah, there was a lot of people coming in and out. My labor kind of calmed down during the day a little bit. The contractions were still pretty hard and pretty uncomfortable. And I do want to point out that if anyone's listening to my story and then gets spooked because of oh wow, she was in that much pain all the time and the contractions never really they were always super hard and intense from the get-go. There was no I would not, I don't know how to say this exactly, but I can't undervalue how much my mental and emotional state were detracting from my labor experience. I was so upset and I was so disheartened and broken that anytime I had a contraction, under normal circumstances, you can kind of recenter yourself on a contraction to be this is painful, but it's bringing me closer to my baby. This is hard, but it's all going to be worth it at the end. I didn't have anything that I could really look forward to say okay, this is hard, this is painful, but fill in the blank. So just as an aside, I wouldn't, take what I say with a grain of salt, that I was physiologically going through it, but emotionally going through it even more so. Having your why taken from you in the middle of labor is very very disheartening, obviously. And then, and I never could really I could like, I found it again after I realized that my husband really wanted to catch the baby. And I knew that being at home would give us our best opportunity to be able to be able to keep Liam with us for as long as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, trying to trying to summarize. Wednesday, like I said, is kind of a blur. At some point, both my sisters were there. My sister Megan was doing birth photography for me, and then my other sister came from. She came after work, and she herself had a very traumatic first labor experience.
Okay.
That that's a whole other podcast in and of itself. But it was very shaping for me and how I looked at pregnancy and labor and postpartum and all these kinds of things. So and so she was there, and oh my gosh. Okay. I know I said I was going to try to summarize, but I have to share this funny story.
Okay.
So at some point, my mom and I were talking, and it was like, okay, she told me, she's like, okay, you can try to go to sleep if you want to, or you can, like, because if you sleep, you will get some rest. The contractions will wake you up, but you'll be able to rest between them. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that, because the only way I was able to like kind of stay in control of like my breathing and my body and everything was as I felt a contraction start to rise, I had like 5 seconds to get get my head in the game, if you will, and get into a good position. And then the contraction would just kind of take over, and then my uterus would or would not relax. And so there would still be that tightness and that uncomfortability. But I was like, if I'm asleep, then I'm not going to get that like 3 to 5 seconds before the contraction to like get prepped. So I was like, nope, I'm just going to stay up. So she's like, okay. So we were in my parents' dining room. They'd moved the table out of the way. And so my mom has these two peanut balls, right? So they're like yoga balls, but they're shaped like a peanut. And so I was kneeling on one with like my arms resting on it. So I was kind of like in a supported kneeling position. And my mom puts the other peanut ball down next to me, and so she can like sit on it with me and like rub my back and be there with me doing the thing. So I'm in labor land. I'm just like consumed with my own stuff that's going on, and I'm aware of her moving next to me. And I see the peanut ball go down, and then I hear this like whoop. And I turn and I look, and my mother is like butt over tea kettle, feet in the air, laying on her back, like struggling to try to get back up.
Oh.
And I look at her and I'm like, did you just fall? And she's busting up laughing, and she's like, yeah, I did. The peanut ball wasn't like inflated all the way, so when she sat too far back, so when she sat down, it like flipped her off.
Oh.
And I started laughing, and I looked at her and I was just like, woman, can you get your crap together? Like, come on. This is not professional, okay? Like, I'm fighting for my life over here, and you're just goofing off. So it was probably the funniest thing that happened during labor. And I will say, my mother has given me permission to tell this story, so it's not telling tales out of school. So that happens. And at some point, my other sister was on my sister Lauren was on the other side of me, and she was like rubbing my back, and they were both kind of talking to me. And my mom kept asking me, do you want us to put the birth pool up? Because they had the new one now that was not, messed up. And I kept saying, I don't know, I don't know. And I kept thinking, how am I supposed to know?
Yeah.
Like, everything is wrong now. I don't have a frame of reference for decision making anymore. Like, everything is wrong. I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
Right.
How should I know if I want to get into the birth tub? How should I know? And so I kept getting annoyed with her. I feel like in reality, she probably only asked me like 3 times if I wanted to. In my head, it felt like she was asking me like 20 times. Like, "Would
Yeah.
you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this?" And it was like super annoying. So at some point, she um, she got the birth pool. They were starting to get the birth pool up, and I moved over, and I was kind of doing some contractions, and I felt my water break, and
Okay.
I was like, oh my gosh, okay, my water broke, wonderful. And so I was like, okay, if my water broke, that means that my cervix is dilated enough that I can get the baby out. That was that was my thought because in Hollywood, when your water breaks, the baby comes like 5 minutes later. Um, and I knew that that wasn't the case
Right.
necessarily, but in my head, I really just wanted the baby to come out. I
Yeah.
wanted him to be here. And so I was taking any sign of like, okay, well, great. Now we're not that far off. We're not that far off. Um, so my water broke, and I told Lauren, go get Will, because again, I was like, okay, I can get this baby out now. And he had been sleeping, trying to rest up. And they got the birth pool up, and it was amazing. Like, it
Yeah.
was so, so nice. Like, I got in and I was actually able to relax. They I was still uncomfortable at times, like with the contractions, but it was so much better.
Yeah.
Um, so like 20 out of 10 recommend birth tubs. Like, they're amazing.
I agree.
There's probably all sorts of stuff that I could throw in, but trying to streamline a little bit.
Yeah.
What ended up being the part of labor that I remember the most specifically was well, one of the parts. I remember Will was sitting in the birth pool with me, and he would be like sitting behind me, kind of holding me up. The contraction would hit, and I would get up onto my knees and kind of assume that same sort of like squatting, kneeling position that I had been in. Like, I pretty much labored in a variation of that position the entire time,
Okay.
in one way or the other. So I would get up, and I'd hold onto the side of the birth pool, and I would, have the contraction, and then the contraction would be over, and I would just like fall back on top of him and completely like just dead weight.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and he would just support me. And that was the best. I slept between contractions a couple of times, because I remember waking up or like having a contraction and having this sense of like, I'm pretty sure I was asleep, and not for like a minute or two. Like, I think I fell asleep for like 20 minutes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of laboring in the birth pool, and that was great. And then Casey, my midwife, once said, hey, I want to check you. I want to see how far your cervix is dilated. And before all of this, I had been really not a big fan of cervical examinations. I
Yeah.
was just like, I've heard they're uncomfortable. I just don't really, I'm kind of a private person. I don't want a whole lot of people like in my space.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think I'm going to want that. And I don't really need it. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I'm going to do that. When everything happened, I was like, no, I need to know. I don't want to do this, but I need to know how far dilated I am, because
Yeah.
at this point it was like early hours of Thursday morning, May 9th, or like somewhere in the like 5, 6 a.m. ish range.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, if I've been laboring this long and I'm only 6 centimeters dilated, I can't do this. I'm just going to go to the hospital. Like, I give up. Like, I can't do it.
Yeah.
So get out of the birth pool. She does the examination and she's like, okay, you are 9.75 centimeters dilated. And I was like, okay, great, perfect. 9 is good enough. Like
Yeah.
that's perfect. I can get a baby out under these situations.
So she's thinking there's just like a little anterior lip or something that
Yes.
we're waiting on. Yeah.
Yeah, there was 100% an anterior lip. And so she told me, she's like, okay, I can hold my finger here and try to push it away while you're contracting. And I was like, absolutely not. That hurts way too much. Like her doing the cervical examinations were, for me, incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope, absolutely not. I don't want that. Especially because, I was just in so much emotional, physical pain at the time. I was like, anything that adds to it is just unsupportable. Just don't even think about it. I think Megan will say to this day, my midwife, Megan, will say that I did not punch her, but I am almost positive that I punched her when she was doing some counter pressure. Like not an actual punch, but like I slapped behind me and I know I made contact with her arm. And I remember saying, I'm so sorry, that just didn't feel good. And she's like, nope, you didn't even hit me. And I'm like,
You're lying.
I don't think that's true. I think I slapped you. But what, anyway. So Thursday morning rolls around and I was starting to get very dehydrated. I hadn't really eaten. I don't think I ate much of anything all day Wednesday because I don't know. I just couldn't really eat anything. My birth team, my mother, my husband, Casey, everyone had been forcing fluids on me, which was good. I had like 2 popsicles, but like I was very dehydrated. Blood sugar was not blood sugaring the way it probably needed to. And there towards the end, I started getting really lightheaded. I had a little bit of a panic attack at one point, kind of, I think, somewhat induced by starting to feel lightheaded because I'm prone to panic attacks in general.
Okay.
So this was not a one-off for me. It was kind of I was dehydrated, tired, scared, upset, already having a hard time breathing because
about to have a baby.
And about to have a baby. So all the things. So
So how long was it when she said you were almost 10 centimeters to when you actually had Liam? Hey everyone, Rachel Manns here, and today I have something I'm thrilled to share with you guys. Imagine having a treasure trove of informative, entertaining, and empowering video content about the journey to parenthood right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with Informed Pregnancy Plus. For less than 25 cents a day, that's a quarter, guys, you'll gain access to a vast subscription library filled with documentary films, web series, mind and body fitness programs, workshops, and courses covering fertility to parenting and everything in between. Designed for new and expectant parents, as well as pregnancy and birth professionals, Informed Pregnancy Plus is like having a trusted BFF and doctor in one, guiding you through every step of the path to and through parenthood. A few of just my favorite titles are obviously The Business of Being Born, Empowered Mama, Belly Dance for Birth, how fun is that? Ease into Sleep, the Afterbirth Plan, and the Core Connection, an extremely well-presented and informative workshop teaching you about your core and pelvic floor and how to keep them healthy. And here's the best part. For a limited time, you can gain full access absolutely free. Just visit informedpregnancy.tv to sign up. Sign up for Informed Pregnancy Plus right now. I'm not kidding, guys. It's really going to help you out. It's my prescription for your informed and empowered parenting journey, all from the comfort of your home. Visit informedpregnancy.tv. That's informedpregnancy.tv, and the link will be in the description below. Now back to the show.
It's a great question. My doula would probably be able to answer that better. I think it was probably about 2 hours, 3 hours
Okay.
maximum. The sun was risen when she checked me and said I was 9 3/4, and I delivered him by 8:28 a.m. So it could not have.
Oh, okay.
So it could not have been more than like 3 hours, I don't think. So I did the rest of my laboring in my parents' bedroom, and I had been pushing for about 4 hours in total, which
Okay.
is a tad longer than I think is probably recommended. And for me, I never felt the urge to push, but
Mhm.
I had this thought in the back of my head that, and I'm sorry if this is a little bit morbid, so trigger warning, but I knew because of my background with childbirth education that birth is a mom and baby process. Like
Yeah.
the baby is helping you, the baby is what kickstarts labor in the first place. So I was like, Liam's dead.
Yeah.
He's not moving. He's not going to be able to do those cardinal movements. He's not going to be working with me. So I'm going to have to do everything myself.
Yeah.
So if that means like I don't feel the urge to push, maybe I'm not going to
Yeah.
because he's gone. Like that was kind of my rationale. It was like, okay, my midwife said I could start pushing. I'm just going to start pushing. I honestly don't think that was probably the best thing to do at the time, but
Yeah.
um regardless. So I I was in my mom's bedroom, and I was in a deep squat on the side of the bed. Like, and I was holding on to the bottom of the bed frame with one hand. My husband Will was laying on top of the bed, and I was holding his other hand with my right. And so every time I had a contraction, I would just kind of pull against the bed frame and pull against his hand and just kind of bear down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been kind of like squatting, but like on the balls of my feet. And then either because my legs were so tired at this point, or I don't know what, I I put my heels down. And when I did that, I felt something just kind of shift a little bit. And I was
Oh.
like, okay. And so I was like, okay, maybe I push like this. And I can't even explain what exactly, but it's that mind body connection
Yeah.
that like that. And when you focus on different muscles or you move slightly differently, you access different muscles.
Mm-hmm.
And so Megan, the midwife, was like, she had a little mirror under, like, she'd scooted underneath me so she could see the progression. So when I put my heels down and something kind of shifted and I pushed slightly differently, she was like, "Yes, that's it. That's it right there. I can see him moving." I'm like, "Perfect. That's what I have to do. Okay, I'm getting this baby out now."
Good.
So I kept pushing and pushing, and I started to feel his head moving, which is a very weird sensation.
Yeah.
Um, and they kept telling me like, okay, like slow down, like take deep breaths, like push when you feel the urge. And I was straight up ignoring everybody at this point because I
Yeah.
was no, I'm tired. I'm done. I'm finally getting some progress. I am going to get this baby out and I'm going to do it now. And I
Yeah.
don't really care. I got to like the ring of fire point and I was like, I know I should slow down because I might tear, but honestly, I don't care because I'm
Yeah.
like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm going to tear there and it's going to be painful. I'm already going to be grieving the loss of my son. Like,
Yeah.
why would I care at this point? And I think after I got the first push and I felt his head move, I asked them, "Where's mom?" Because she was laying down in the other room trying to rest a little bit. And sweet Megan was like, "Oh, she's laying down in the other room, but you're okay. You've still got plenty of time, but we can go get her if you want."
Hmm.
And I had one more contraction, and I pushed again, and I felt him move, and I just like screamed like, "Mom!" And she of
Oh,
course came in the room because it wasn't like I was afraid or I was scared. I was just
yeah.
like, "This baby is coming out, and you need to be here."
Yeah.
Um, in my estimation, I thought I was squatting there for like maybe 10 minutes max, like probably less than that. Like
Yeah.
my husband later told me, he was like, "You held a deep squat for like 20 minutes straight." And I'm like, "No, I did not." And he's like, "You absolutely did. I was there. I kept time. Like you were a beast. Like this is
Yeah.
ridiculous." So so I kept pushing and I kept pushing, and I got the head out. I remember feeling that, because that was a very, very strange feeling if you've
Yes.
never birthed before. Straight unique, I think, is a better word. And then at some point, because I was so low to the ground, there wasn't like they couldn't get him out
Yeah.
completely. So they laid me kind of back a little bit. And I remember my mom saying, like, his head's out. You can like you can touch him, you can reach down. And I tried to, but I didn't feel like I was stable enough, and so
Yeah.
I just kept pushing. And this was also a point where the midwives were like, "Okay, just push when you have a contraction." I'm like, I don't I'm not having contractions. It's just kind of, honestly, after his head came out, I don't really remember feeling a lot of tightness like for
Yeah.
a contraction. I may have still been, and I just wasn't paying attention. I don't know. So I kind of just Megan did some maneuvering and got his the cord was wrapped around, but she said it was not wrapped tightly. They're not really sure if that might have contributed or not.
Yeah.
Um, and she kind of got his shoulders to wiggle out, and then the next thing I know, he's out, and my husband got to catch him, which was still really nice.
Yeah.
And he held him for a little bit. I don't really know how long, but then the next thing I really remember is like my mom, because I'm still kind of laying on my back with my
Mhm.
feet up, and she kind of like lifts my leg, and he like sticks the baby under, and I like just grabbed him, and he was so floppy, like
Yeah.
just so incredibly floppy and slippery.
Yeah.
So like they put some blankets on top of him so that I wouldn't drop him, and to try to keep any residual body heat in, because it was really cold,
Yeah.
which was also strange. And yeah, that was it was still, my husband and I talked about it afterwards, that it was still kind of sweet that even though this situation is not normal and not necessarily good, that those kind of instincts to just hold your baby to
Yeah.
you were still there. Like I
Yeah.
wasn't there was no part of me that didn't want to hold him or didn't want to um like it just instinct took over,
Yeah.
which was still really nice to see.
Well, and from a few things you said from the rest of your birth too, you were still really in tune with your instincts as far as like, you could feel like you put your heels down, you could feel that he moved, like you could feel that within your body. You were really in tune to it, even
Yeah,
though he wasn't there anymore.
yeah, it was, I think there was a lot of I can't really tell now if certain things, like I got really quiet and I didn't really talk to anybody, and at the time I thought it was just the grief and the shock.
Yeah.
I think a lot. I think it's also just kind of the normal process of going into going into yourself that moms kind of naturally do when they're
Yeah.
doing, a home birth or natural labor in general, that you do kind of just like you're still aware of things going on, but you're paying more attention to your body and what's happening and kind of moving more instinctively and being like, I don't know why, but I need to stand in this place right now and I need to, do this thing differently and that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, so that was his that everything after that is also kind of a blur. They weighed him. He was only like 6 pounds, 8 ounces. He was 21 and 3/4 inches tall, so he was a big baby. He had these gigantic hands and feet. Like he had huge hands and feet. So I was like, oh, he was gonna be a big kid. And so, we still got to do and
A lot
sorry.
more, I'm sure it was a lot more of like a peaceful and intimate process versus had you been in the hospital.
Absolutely. Because I think I can't speak to what would have happened if we'd been in a hospital because obviously I've never been there for a labor and a delivery. And I'm not a medical professional, but I don't know that they would have let me hold him right away. I don't know that they would have done like we still got handprints and we got feet prints and they did all of his measurements and we we got to do everything that we possibly could with him. We still got to put a diaper on him and put him in his first outfit, and we washed his hair and we washed his face, and everybody, my whole immediate family and Will's parents were able to come and hold him and cry
That
with
was
the
probably the biggest difference, just that
oh
your family
yeah,
was able to be there to grieve that
absolutely,
loss also. And that may not have been as possible in the hospital. I
yeah,
know a lot of our
absolutely.
hospitals around here are really good about that kind of stuff, but it just depends on the hospital. I know some of them
It
probably
does.
wouldn't let you keep your baby, hold on to your baby for long and
Yeah.
do
And
all
I
that.
think
So,
and I think having everybody there was really it was really nice. Will and I are going to carry this grief more so than anybody else and in a way that's much more personal than everybody else, but it kind of helped to solidify the fact that Liam's life touched so many different people. You know, he
yeah.
was he was going to be the first, well, he's the first grandson on my husband's side of the family.
Oh,
Um, and we were really excited about that. And, he is like, he was going to be a little cousin. So he had like the only people that didn't get to see the baby were my niece and my nephew, who are almost 4 and 2 years old respectively. And so it was kind of like,
yeah.
yeah, that's probably not, that was okay. I think I
Yeah.
don't, uh, but yeah, we got to keep Liam for inadvertently kind of the whole day,
Yeah.
because the coroner didn't end up coming. The courier for the coroner didn't end up coming until around 8:30 that night.
Wow.
So we got a lot of time with him, which was really nice.
Yeah.
We got to take pictures and hold him and do just about everything with him that we could think of, which was really good. And yeah, it was.
Backed by the most up-to-date science and research, we bring you the best prenatal on the market. Full Well is an amazing prenatal vitamin formulated with the best of the best ingredients and bioavailable nutrient and mineral forms that help to fill in nutrition gaps for mom and baby. These prenatal vitamins are tested for consistent dosing and heavy metals and then verified by a third party for every single batch. That way, you know what you are buying is truly what you need.
Not only does Full Well have an amazing prenatal, they also carry women and men's fish oil, a men's multivitamin, a fertility booster, and an amazing Nourished Nerves calming tincture, which is one of our favorites. We are both so happy to announce that we can offer you guys a 10% discount on your first order. So you just have to use the code TNBT10. So that's the Natural Birth Talk, TNBT10. The link is in the description below. You can insert that code into the coupon code box to save. Hey, Tiffany, do you have any tips for someone who pee-pees their pants a little bit when they say jump or sneeze? I'm just asking for a friend.
Actually, I have a fantastic suggestion that can be done in the comfort of your own home and was created by published researchers with a background in exercise physiology and physical therapy. It's called Tighten Your Tinkler.
Oh my gosh, silly name, but it must have some serious results.
Yeah, learn more by listening to the audio testimonial in the description or use code TNBT50 for $50 off the signature program.
Hey listener, do you want a comprehensive yet concise and inexpensive online at your own pace natural birth education course to help you prepare for natural birth, pregnancy, and postpartum? Then check out the description below for that and our helpful products guide. Now back to the show. It sounds like everything went as well as it could have, considering,
Absolutely.
the terrible situation that it was.
Yeah. I talked to Casey about it like the next day when she came to, check on me and see how I was doing. And in the days following, outside of the glaringly obvious, my labor was kind of textbook. Like I was in labor for 41 hours and everything based off of a first time mom was like, this is pretty normal.
Yeah.
I even delivered on my actual due date.
Did you really?
I did. And I told my husband, I'm like, that little stinker, because referring to Liam, because I had been telling people that I'm like, there's no way I'm going to go into labor on my due date because that's just nobody does that. Like nobody does that. And I was like, I feel like there was just a little bit of that firstborn stubbornness of like, well, I'll show you, mom. Like,
yeah,
I'm going to come on my due date. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people would have just automatically gone to the hospital.
Absolutely.
And you obviously considered that. And I think it's a reasonable choice to go to the hospital. But I think that by staying home and choosing to stillbirth your baby at home, you gained a lot.
Oh, 100%. Like, I do not regret any decision that I made in the process. Being at home allowed me to still feel safe and to still feel comfortable and, to still have the home birth that I wanted. And
to be surrounded by people you know and love and that were able to support you personally versus, constantly being hooked up to a machine and being watched under a microscope,
Right. And I mean, there's any number of things that I could mention is like, if I'd been in the hospital, if there was a change, like if there was a shift change and then a nurse comes in and is all like, are you ready to have a baby today? And like, doesn't understand what's going on. I'm like, I might have throat chopped her, like not, and the fact that I don't know how long a hospital would have let me keep my baby, which is already just like such a disgusting thing in my mind that I'm like, I'm sorry, you're letting me keep my baby? Like, it's my baby. Like, you don't get to tell me that I can't have my baby with me for as long as I want to. Obviously I have to give him up at some point, but like the idea of having a hospital dictate to me what point that was very untenable. So like, so like I said, I don't know how long they would have allowed it, but probably not a whole day like
Right.
that. And yeah, like the amount of people that were able to come and see him and all that. So and I talked to the other thought that I had when I was in labor was that I was like, when I have like the thought that I had when I was like, I really just want to go to the hospital and I want to just do the C-section. I just want to be done. And I was like, but if I do that, when I get pregnant again,
Yeah.
I don't think an OB, like, I don't know that I'm gonna find a midwife that's gonna feel comfortable because VBACs, virginal birth after cesarean are already, people have a lot of different thoughts about them. But I was like, if I have a VBAC, or if I'm trying to have a VBAC after having an emergency C-section for a stillborn baby, I just don't know if anyone's going to accept that.
Yeah. Well, and plus C-sections have risks for future pregnancies, like the scar
Right.
tissue and all of that. There is a risk for future pregnancy. I probably would have made the same choice. I mean, I've never been in that situation. I probably would have made the same choice you did. But I could totally understand why someone would want to go to the hospital and just have a C-section too.
Absolutely. And
Um,
I would not judge and I would not shame and I would not say like, oh, well, you did the wrong choice because, blah, blah, blah. No, this for me was the right choice. And for someone else, it might be totally different, and that's okay.
I
Um,
think it's good that you were able to think futuristically, though, when you kind of thought about
yes.
that C-section. You thought about, well, what's this going to look like for future pregnancies? I think that was
Yeah.
really smart.
So
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, so overall, everything being considered, I am just so glad that I listened to my husband and my mom, and chose to do the home birth because it was just the best choice
Yeah.
overall for everything.
Yeah.
And I'm yeah, I'm just really glad that I did it.
Good. Good. And I know you're a Christian and you talked about your pastor. And so I can just imagine, how relying on God and just trying to trust his plan through this, how it has to be a challenge, but
Oh,
it's
100%.
also, got to be really comforting to know
It
that
is.
he's
It's
there.
been um during labor, I'll be very honest. During labor, I had no idea where God was.
Yeah.
Like, just could not feel his presence, could not see his hand, just was like, there there is just lost. There was just nothing there. Um
Yeah.
Afterwards, in this like postpartum and grieving period, I've been able to see him working in the here and now, but I've also been able to see how he was there in moments that
Yeah.
I was not able to see it at the time just because it could have been the grief, could have been the labor process. It's hard to say. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's been one of the biggest things that we've talked a lot about is how uplifted we've felt in the past. I'm like 7 weeks this Thursday. Actually, oh, I guess today's Thursday. Um, 7 weeks postpartum. Just how uplifted we've been
Yeah.
by other people praying for us, and
Yeah.
um, in the days following basically what it comes down to is that Will and I both have experienced peace that passes all understanding. The
Yeah.
grief has not like driven us apart,
That's good.
from each other. That is because
Yeah.
I know a lot of times these things can happen and couples can kind of cannibalize and have a hard time working together. We still have struggles like anybody
Yeah.
else, but there are just so many different things. We have that peace, we haven't been driven apart, we've seen God's goodness in these situations, and
Yeah.
it's one of those like there is no explanation for why either of us are doing as well as we are,
Yeah.
but for the grace of God.
Yeah.
And that's what I kind of just keep rolling back to, because I'm like, if I had heard that there was a woman who had a stillbirth with her firstborn child, that she still had a home delivery, I would have been like, wow, that lady is superwoman. That's amazing. And she still got out of bed the next morning. Like, she wasn't just consumed with depression and grief
Yeah.
and like was never able to live a fulfilling life after that. Like, wow, she's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I could never do that. And yet here I am,
Yeah.
as that person. And I still I'm still getting out of bed in the morning. I'm still trying to do the best I can. Now, I'm not
Yeah.
going to say that, like, oh yeah, I'm doing great and like my life is
Right.
amazing, because it's not. It's kind of just life. But I'm like, there is no explanation for how I am coping as well as I am
Right.
if you exclude God. And so I'm like, I'm
Right.
not taking any credit. I'm not taking any, like, oh, I am so, cool. Like, I'm just
Yeah.
so amazing. Like, I'm just tanking this. It's like, no, it's not me. It's definitely not
Right.
me. Because on my own, I would be a puddle in the corner, just not
Right.
being able to recuperate from this loss. So yeah, having God has made probably all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That I'm sure was a very hard thing to come on and share your story, but I'm really grateful you did. I'm really happy you're here. I know Tiffany's gonna be ready to listen to the rest of it. I know she's bummed she had to hop off. But we really do appreciate you being here and sharing. I think it's a perspective that a lot of moms maybe have never even thought of.
Absolutely.
And it can be a really good perspective to share. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I just have one, I'll say quick, but one quote unquote quick thing that I do want to say for anybody who is in the who is anybody who's pregnant and worried about loss, as like either you've experienced it before, or you're just kind of worried because pregnancy is a big unknown. One of the things that I have found for myself to be really helpful was naming my son.
Okay.
We had a little nickname for him when he was before we found out that he was a boy. We called him Chippy because he was the size of a chocolate chip when I found out I was pregnant. So for the first like half, we just called him Chippy, and we kept calling him Chippy pretty much up until the point that he was born. But I remember after we found out he was a boy, having a conversation with my husband and saying, so he's a boy, he's the firstborn, and so we had always said that we wanted to name our first son Liam. And
Mhm.
that the story of how we came up with that name is a whole other story itself. And I won't, we're trying to wrap up here, so I
Mhm.
won't go into that. But it was a very, very special, significant name. So I was like, okay, here's the thing. I'm like, I don't, and I was like 20, somewhere between 21 and 24 weeks pregnant at this point.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, I don't want to be this guy, but I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, if we name, if we give Chippy the name of Liam and anything happens, we won't be able to use that name for any of our other children. We will never have a son named Liam. And, so, but I do really feel like this is his name. And
Mhm.
Will was like, yeah, I've prayed about it. I've thought about it. And this is his name. And so we were like, okay, that's just what we're going to do. And neither one of us have regretted that. It is still incredibly sad that we really were looking forward to having a son named Liam
Mhm.
and being able to say that name and, like, Liam, it's time for dinner, and like, that kind of thing, and like having that person. But it's naming our son for us did a couple of different things because it validates his personhood. It validates that he was a person. He was our son, and he has a name, and we can use that name when we talk about him. It's not just the baby or, the pregnancy or whatever. And while it is sad that we're not going to get to use that name now, that's not even really the right way to phrase it, because it's like, well, we did get to use that name. We do have a son named Liam, and not giving the baby that ended up being lost a name doesn't detract from that pain of losing the baby, if that makes sense. So that was just one thing that I think is really helpful. And I wanted to encourage anyone who is either having a pregnancy after a loss or is currently pregnant, has never experienced a loss, but is just kind of worried. And I don't know how common these thoughts are because, I have a anxiety prone brain sometimes, and I'm really boned up on a lot of information about this kind of stuff. But that was just something that I was like, I just want people to know that, like, you don't have to be afraid of naming your baby and afraid of being attached, because if you lose them, it's going to hurt regardless.
Yeah.
And having a name validates the fact that they were a person and that they were a big part of your life. And it makes for really good shorthand for when my husband is like, he looks at me and he can tell I'm really upset, and he's like, what's wrong? All I have to do is just say Liam, and he knows, like, oh, she's reliving the pregnancy, or she's thinking about the delivery, or she's thinking about the future that we don't have with our son anymore.
Yeah.
Which for me, I have found in the grieving process, being able to communicate a lot with using just a couple of words is really helpful, because talking is kind of exhausting sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
it's a lot.
But yeah, that was kind of a long addendum to put at the end of it. But that was something that I was like, I really want to get that across to people.
I think that is a helpful thing to say as well, and I would totally agree with you from my outside perspective. So thank you again for being here.
Absolutely.
Listeners, I know it probably was not the easiest episode to listen to, but at the same time, I hope that, maybe just listening to it's going to help you to help someone around you in some way. If you guys have any questions, just, feel free to reach out at contact@thenaturalbirthsite.com. Thank you so much for listening to that, and we will talk to you in the next episode. Hi, Rachel Manns again. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to and rate this podcast, and head over to thenaturalbirthsite.com to check out our online natural birth education course, birth story blog, YouTube channel, and more.